They tried to kick me from my cabin. Turns out I own the lake, the shoreline, and the lot. I didn't buy the lake. I inherited it, along with a legacy, a promise, and a cabin that smelled like cedar and ghost stories. My name's Daniel Crosby, and if you've ever spent a 4th of July on Mirror Lake, chances are you've canoed right past my family's dock. My great-granddad homesteaded this spot in 1899, before zoning laws, before subdivisions, before anyone thought of putting a Welcome to Lakeshore Estates sign at the turnoff like they own the place. They don't. I do. When I first came back to the cabin, I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for silence. After 10 years running disaster response units overseas, Haiti, Ukraine, Indonesia, I was done watching communities burn down and rebuild without ever healing. My mom passed last spring, and I took that as my cue to come home and finally breathe again. The cabin wasn't much, no cell service, no working plumbing, just memories nailed into the walls. But it was mine. What I didn't know, what none of us Crosbys knew, was that the lakeshore had changed in our absence. And not just the trees or the fish, the people. Lakeshore Estates had arrived, and with it the fake HOA. It started subtly. The first week back, I noticed pink flyers taped to my fence. Noise ordinance reminder. Exterior paint color approval pending. I laughed at first, thought they were pranks. I hadn't even used my generator yet. Then came the knock. She had a clipboard, mirrored sunglasses, and that practice smile that makes you check if your wallet's still in your pocket. Hello, I'm Carissa with the Lakeshore Homeowners Association. We're so excited to have you as part of the community. I'm here to collect your $275 annual dues and give you our welcome packet. I blinked. Excuse me. She motioned to the cabins on the eastern ridge. This whole lakeside is now under the HOA's purview. We just ratified that in May. Your property technically falls within our jurisdiction. I stared at her. Lady, I am the jurisdiction. Her smile faded half a degree. I'm sorry, I pointed to the rusted plaque by the gatepost, Crosby Land Grant 1899. Lakefront and adjoining shoreline. Protected by deed. I'm not new here. You are. She blinked fast, then leaned in as if I were hard of hearing. That plaque is very cute, but we'll need you to comply with architectural and environmental regulations, especially since this structure is visible from the water. It affects property values. Then she turned, walking away before I could reply. My knuckles stayed white for a full minute. 2 days later, they drained my rain barrels. I found the lids removed, the water spilled, and a laminated tag zip-tied to the spout, unauthorized water collection, non-compliant with HOA conservation rules. Subject to fine, that water had been reserved for my garden, my mom's old tomatoes. Now, the soil was dust, and my hands shook with something I hadn't felt since deployment righteous fury. I started asking around. Turns out, half the Lakeshore Estates community thought I'd sold the cabin years ago. Carissa told them it was abandoned and due for auction. She'd even posted a phony listing online, offering lake-adjacent undeveloped parcels that included my dock. No one questioned her. They were too busy sipping wine spritzers on their brand-new paddleboards. The sheriff showed up 3 weeks in, said there'd been disturbances, reported threatening behavior from someone living illegally on HOA land. When he saw my deed, he scratched his beard, confused. Well, this here supersedes anything she's claiming. But she showed us a map that marked your cabin inside her boundaries. A fake map, I growled. He gave a slow nod. Mind if I come back with a county clerk? I nodded. Bring the judge too. The next day, Carissa called a meeting, not at town hall, on my lawn, with folding chairs, a podium, and an oversized laminated banner that read, Lakeshore HOA Special Session, Illegal Occupation Review. I thought I was hallucinating. Neighbors filed in like sheep, murmuring about my generator, the compost bin, the lack of aesthetic compliance. Carissa wore a name badge and a mic. She waved at a man holding a drone controller. We're documenting everything for code purposes. That's when I stepped onto the porch, in boots, with my deed. and a rolled-up map so old it was stained with motor oil and tears. "This ends now," I said. The drone camera turned toward me like a cyclops, blinking. I unrolled the map on the picnic table, showed the crowd my survey boundaries. The lake itself mine, the shoreline mine. The dock definitely mine. Even the trail they paved over with fake cobblestones, technically my family's right-of-way since 1903. Carissa tried to interrupt. I spoke louder. "You see this? You've been picnicking, kayaking, and building on land I never gave up. Your HOA. It doesn't exist legally, and your president. She's about to be very sorry she ever touched my rain barrels. But she didn't back down. Not yet. She did what tyrants do when cornered. She escalated. She screamed I was threatening the safety of the neighborhood, demanded I be removed for community morale, and picked up her phone dialing 911 as if I were holding the town hostage. When the deputies showed up, I stayed seated. I'd already laid out the deed, the map, and the original cabin charter, all of it laminated, notarized, and clipped into a folder I'd only ever used for government contracts. Years in disaster zones had taught me that paper was stronger than fists. But I still kept my hands in view. Always. Because Carissa, like people with just enough power to be dangerous, knew exactly how to twist fear into a weapon. She greeted the officers like she was the mayor, pointing at me, using words like threat, uncooperative male, and ongoing structural hazard. Deputy Langley, who'd served 2 tours in the Guard, kept a hand on his belt but never reached for the taser. "Mr. Crosby," he said, nodding at me. Got the deed on hand, I handed it over without a word. His partner, a younger guy with a nervous energy, eyed my generator and water tanks. "She says you've been blocking community access to the lake." I pointed toward the faded sign at the shoreline. "You mean my lake?" Carissa tried again. "He's being hostile." "We had an HOA vote and ma'am," Langley cut in, "you keep saying HOA, but this area isn't registered under any county-approved homeowners association." "We checked." Carissa paled. "That's a mistake. I submitted the paperwork last spring. We have bylaws." Look, she rifled through a binder like it was sacred scripture. "We voted him out. We gave notice." I stood up slowly, my voice low. "You can't vote me out of my own land." I should have stopped there. But fury is funny when it finds you thirsty, disrespected, and watching your mother's tomatoes rot in sun-baked soil. "You drained my rain tanks," I said. "You cut off my water, trashed my garden, and printed a fake property map to sell access to a lake that's been in my family for 124 years. Carissa scoffed. "No one believed that dusty old claim. It's 2025. You're squatting on premium real estate." I laughed harsh, humorless. "And you're trespassing, along with every paddleboarder and lawn chair revolutionary you sold a lie to." Langley whistled under his breath. "He's got your number." "Ma'am." Carissa turned red, furious. "You're all going to regret siding with a squatter." The next week, I came back from town to find a construction crew parked at my trailhead. They'd poured gravel, unloaded tools, started framing what looked like a lakeside gazebo right on my marsh. The foreman waved like we were neighbors. "You the cabin guy. We're here for the HOA garden platform. Says it's a public beautification project. Permits and everything?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the supports they'd sunk 3 feet deep into Crosby land. That night, I made 3 calls to the county clerk, a civil engineer I knew from the Guard, and my cousin Talia, who just happened to be the editor of the county paper. By morning, Talia had published the headline, "Fake HOA Sparks Property. War on Mirror Lake Landowner Says He Owns It All." It exploded. Residents started calling me, apologizing, asking if they really had no lake access. One guy admitted he'd paid Carissa $3,000 for a permanent shoreline slip. Others weren't as nice. "You're ruining everything," one woman screamed into my voicemail. "Our property values will drop if people think they bought stolen land. I recorded everything." A week later, I walked outside to find my dock sawn in half. Floating planks drifted like corpses across the morning fog. The sign was gone. The chain anchoring the fishing boat had been cut. My boundary markers flagged with red tape and GPS coordinates ripped up. The destruction was surgical, personal. That was the day I called my lawyer. We filed a cease and desist, filed a trespassing report, hired a land surveyor, and just for good measure, I posted laminated copies of the deed along the shoreline every 100 feet. The next day, someone spray-painted community access, Kwana, freedom across my porch. I didn't bother scrubbing it. I took a photo, sent it to Talia. She ran a second article, Lake Showdown escalates owner, harassed after HOA, demands democracy over his land. Now the whole county was watching. Carissa called a rally. Of course she did. They showed up with signs, boats, and a speaker system. She wore a sash that said, HOA President, for the people. A guy on a kayak had a bullhorn, screaming down with land hoarders. Like I was an oil baron. I stood on the dock with folded arms, said nothing. The camera crew from the local news asked if I wanted to respond. I just pointed to the torn-up dock behind me. You think I want this? You think I enjoy calling the sheriff weekly to get people off my front yard? Carissa tried to grab the mic. He's lying. He's manipulating the narrative. He's a boom echoed across the water. It wasn't a gun. It was the gazebo frame collapsing, sinking into the marsh because they hadn't checked for water lines. They'd built it on top of an old runoff culvert. Half the protesters scattered. The other half stared as boards bobbed in silence. It was the loudest quiet I've ever heard. And then Carissa screamed. He sabotaged it. That was her final mistake, because this time, the deputies had body cams, and the county attorney, she was watching live. After the rally collapsed literally and figuratively, I waited for the spin. I didn't have to wait long. That same night, Carissa went live on a community Facebook page. Eyes glassy, mascara streaked, wrapped in a beach towel like she'd survived a shipwreck. He destroyed our gazebo, our place to gather, our right to build hope. I almost laughed, except she had 700 shares by midnight. The video made me look like some grizzled prepper hoarding land and bullying innocent neighbors. People who hadn't been within 50 miles of the lake now felt entitled to my shoreline. But not everyone bought it. The body cam footage from Deputy Langley's unit showed her screaming about sabotage before anyone mentioned it. You could hear her shouting at the foreman, I don't care if it's wetland, just pour the concrete. Talia aired it with a segment title that read, Leaked footage contradicts HOA president's claims. Did she ignore safety warnings? Carissa tried damage control. She printed glossy flyers, hosted a lake wellness seminar, and even brought in a lifestyle influencer from out of state who called me emotionally toxic to community growth. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to court. My lawyer, Petra, a Navajo woman who wore turquoise earrings like war medals, filed a temporary restraining order and an injunction to halt further construction on the disputed shoreline. I hope she pushes this, Petra said, flipping through Carissa's so-called bylaws. This stuff wouldn't hold up in a Sims game. We presented deeds going back to 1898. Petra brought expert witnesses, including a hydrologist who testified that Carissa's marshside gazebo violated 5 separate state conservation codes. The judge grizzled, tired, but sharp rubbed his eyes and said dryly, Didn't think I'd be dealing with HOA piracy this month, but here we are. Carissa no-showed the second hearing. Too busy running for county environmental coordinator. I wish I was kidding. Her platform reclaiming lakes for the people. Meanwhile, my property had become a magnet for vandals and drone harassment. At one point, I caught a group of teenagers trying to string a hammock between my well pipe and the solar inverter. You're trespassing, I told them. One kid shrugged. We thought this was public land. HOA said so. I showed them the sign, then the permit, then the sheriff's number. They left without a fight, but not without a warning. She's going to turn the whole town against you. That night, I walked the shoreline by flashlight. My dock was still useless. The air smelled like wet cedar and gasoline. I spotted a float tube deflated and tied to a log abandoned from the failed protest. But beneath the moonlight, something shimmered near the base of the ruined gazebo. A pipe, bent, cracked. I followed it back my grandfather's old irrigation line, the one that fed the inlet marsh when water was low. Carissa's gazebo hadn't just collapsed to protest. It had broken the line that kept the lake's ecosystem breathing during drought. I felt sick. I emailed photos to Petra and called the water board. Within a week, a conservation officer came out. He looked grim. "She's triggered a spill," he said. "This runoff will dry up half your cattail basin by July. Fish will die, so will the turtles. That's state-registered wetland. Mr. Crosby, she's in serious trouble." He took soil samples, flagged the zone, and promised to escalate. Carissa, predictably, called it fake science in her next livestream. "He's trying to sabotage my campaign with Ecobabble Talia's next headline. HOA President's beautification project may have caused illegal ecological harm." Boom. By now, the town was divided. Some defended Carissa, accusing me of weaponizing legacy property to hoard nature. Others called her a manipulative fraud, using HOA language to push personal gain. At the town meeting that month, someone tried to shout me down as a lake tyrant, so I brought maps, history, photos of my grandfather fishing from that dock in 1949. The deed, the damage, the pollution, the culvert, the bent pipe. I ended my speech with one line: "I'm not the one who broke the lake." Silence. Even Carissa, who had shown up in a pearl-white blouse and President pin, didn't interrupt. By the next day, the sheriff had a warrant for her to appear. The county issued a notice of violation for illegal construction in a protected zone, civil fines, environmental damages. Then came the twist. Turns out Carissa never filed HOA status properly with the state. Her paperwork forged, dates mismatched, signatures duplicated. The notary stamp belonged to a dog grooming business. Petra grinned when we found it. "You don't win by yelling," she said. "You win with proof." Still, Carissa wouldn't go quietly. She staged one last stunt, tried to host a Lake Freedom Festival without permits. Brought in a DJ, food trucks, inflatable slides, called it Community Reclamation Day, but this time nobody came, not even the influencer. The lake was too low, and the wind carried the smell of rot. The lake didn't need Carissa's lies to dry up, it just needed time and damage. And she gave it both. By late June, the lower marsh was all but dust. I'd walk out in the morning and see raccoon prints in the muck. Turtles gone, herons disappeared. Even the frogs had gone silent. State conservation declared it a critical zone and started investigating a full wetland rehabilitation order. Carissa blamed me. He sabotaged the project out of spite. She cried on Facebook Live. He wants the lake dead so no one can enjoy it. But this time, the public didn't buy it. The turning point came from the least likely person. Rebecca Chang, a young biology student who'd done an internship at the university's environmental field lab, published a thread on Twitter titled, "How One Woman's HOA Power Trip Killed a Living Lake." She mapped the timelines, shared soil toxicity tests, even had a drone video showing sediment collapse around the gazebo's foundation. The post went viral. Local, then regional news picked it up. Suddenly, my story wasn't my story anymore. It was the town's, and Carissa. She was no longer just a nosy neighbor with a clipboard. She was a pariah. Within a week, protest signs popped up along the walking trail. "Save what's left. Our lake, not her empire." HOA, Harm of Authority. Talia aired a two-part expose. The headline: Scorch Faked Authority, Real Damage. The HOA president, who wasn't, Carissa tried a rebrand, claimed she was stepping down for her health, but leaked emails revealed she was threatening to sue the town for emotional harassment. Instead, the town sued her class action, led by a coalition of lakeside homeowners and local families. Petra filed amicus briefs in support. That same week, I got a knock on my door. It was Tom Kendrick, former mayor, retired Navy. He owned the old lodge on the far end of the lake. We'd never talked much beyond neighborly waves, but now he looked furious. "She built a fire pit next to my propane tank," he said, claimed it was part of a community enhancement plan. "My wife has PTSD, and she lit fireworks." I invited him in that night over whiskey and lake wind. We put together what we jokingly called the Lake Defense Pact. In a week, we had 12 members. In 240, we didn't just fight back. We organized. We filed property boundary complaints, unearthed improper permitting on half a dozen HOA projects, and brought in a water law consultant who practically drooled when he saw the mess. This isn't negligence, he said. It's fraud. Carissa's world collapsed like her gazebo. She held a final community dinner that no one attended except for two men from the Attorney General's office. They weren't there for dessert. They served her. Carissa was charged with impersonating an HOA official, filing false permits, ecological damage to a protected wetland, tampering with county property maps, intimidation of private landowners. Her mugshot didn't go viral. It exploded. She looked nothing like her filtered Facebook photos. Her HOA president blouse was gone, replaced by a generic orange jumpsuit. Some still tried to defend her in the comment threads. She meant well. She cared about the community. She was just trying to bring order. But most knew better, and the screenshots didn't lie. A week after her arrest, a local boy named Finn, 9 years old, stood on the steps of Town Hall during a public forum and said into the mic, "We should let Mr. Crosby have his lake back. He was here first." People clapped. Some cried. Carissa's house was put up for sale. Her signs came down, and the gazebo. The state paid to tear it out and install a low-impact wildlife shelter instead. The day they hauled it off in pieces, I sat in a folding chair by the shore, sipping coffee as the sun finally reflected clear off the water again. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Carissa wanted control, not community, and when control crumbled, so did her entire illusion. She tried to claim she was the lake's protector, but the lake had always protected itself through us, the ones who loved it, lived near it, respected it. She underestimated the strength of quiet ownership and the patience of nature. In the days after Carissa's arrest, quiet came back. Not the fearful, tight-lipped quiet she once ruled over. No, this was earned silence, the kind that comes after the storm passes and people take their first full breath again. For the first time in 2 years, I could open my door and smell pine and algae in peace without wondering what paper would be taped to my gate next. They removed her fake HOA mailbox. The street signs she'd installed replaced with county-verified names. That grotesque statue she forced into the roundabout, hauled out, brick by brick. It was like the land itself was healing. I spent most of July walking the lake with my journal, mapping trees, marking the return of dragonflies, watching turtles poke their heads up near the reeds. It wasn't perfect. Some shoreline damage would take years to reverse, but you could feel the shift. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to since Carissa rose to power started showing up at my cabin, with pie, with apologies, with tools and offers to help restore the trails she'd paved over. I didn't ask for any of it, but I accepted, because that's how healing begins, one gesture at a time. A few weeks later, I hosted a town meeting, not in a stuffy hall or behind locked doors like Carissa used to, just a picnic by the lake. We called it The Water Belongs to All. Kids played, old-timers swapped stories. A county rep came and officially recertified the lake as a protected zone. And when they asked if I wanted to build a proper community board, something real, something lasting, I said yes. But under one condition: we don't vote in titles here, Mom. I told them, we vote in trust. They nodded, and this time, it felt true. The biggest surprise came in the form of a letter from Carissa. It was handwritten, no envelope, just folded inside a return-to-sender packet from the DA's office. It read, "I wanted to control the place because I never felt like I belonged anywhere. I thought if I could make people follow me, I wouldn't feel so small. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry. I see it now. I broke something beautiful, and I hope you can fix it." There were coffee stains on the edge, or maybe tears. I'll never know, but I kept it, because accountability matters even if it arrives late. By fall, the trees turned gold again. Deer wandered close, and in the mornings, Mist curled off the lake like the breath of something waking back up. That's the thing about places we love when we fight for them. They remember the cabin, the lake, the shoreline. They never needed fences or flags. They needed caretakers, not controllers. Carissa taught us that brutally, publicly, but lessons learned in pain often leave the strongest roots. And now the land is free, not because we won, but because we remembered who we are when we're not afraid. What would you have done if someone like Carissa claimed authority they never earned? Have you ever watched a quiet person stand up and change everything? Share your thoughts on justice, ownership, and what it truly means to belong in a community. Let's talk about what's right together.